In doing research for my last video, it was pretty easy to notice that game accessibility and variety was the driving factor of console sales over the generations. But when you observe the hype for new games today, it seems as if the days of console exclusives and debates of which console is better has fallen to the wayside. With the rise of PC gaming, the lack of advanced storage and CPU options for consoles, and the decrease in console exclusive games, consoles might not stick around for much longer. If you need more context to the history of consoles, I did release a video recently.
Hi, this is low quality editing Kyla here. That video is going to come out on Thursday. Back to the rest of this one.
So be sure to check that out if you want a bit more historical context to the actual console market. Going back to the late 80s / early 90s, we see the first example of the console war trend between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo or SNES system. When looking at the tech specifications of each console, the Genesis is a pretty clear winner with its 1632-bit Motorola 6800 CPU and the ability to clock in at around 7.6 MHz. Compared to the Super Nintendo's 816-bit Raiko 5A22 clock averaging at around 3.58 MHz, the Genesis was the pretty clear winner. When it came to marketing, Sega made a big deal of being cooler than the Super Nintendo. This coincidentally also explains why we meme so hard about Sonic the Hedgehog being so cool. He was literally created to be the young hip face of Sega branding back in the early 90s. The Sonic the Hedgehog game was bundled with the Genesis, console's price was slashed, and the game library was expanded in anticipation for the Super Nintendo's release in 1991. Following its release and standing on the powerhouse flagship game franchises of Mario and The Legend of Zelda, the Super Nintendo and its family-friendly content still saw a good amount of sales on release. However, the changes that Sega had implemented in hopes of getting the jump on its competitor led to an early market domination. However, it was the popularity of Mortal Kombat, the grittier and gorier Street Fighter, that brought the final showdown to the Sega Nintendo war. With Nintendo's choice to completely censor the gore present in the game, they ended up selling less units due to Sega's version allowing players to enter a cheat code that restored the original arcade version to the console port, which meant blood and guts galore. Now, later on with the release of Sony's PlayStation, both companies would lose out due to its memory card system that allowed for much longer games such as Final Fantasy VII. Sony itself wouldn't see a competitor until the sixth console generation with the PS2 and the Xbox, and the second big console war was officially about to kick off. Now, the original Xbox didn't have the sales and numbers that the PS2 did, but it did feature the first online console service with the Xbox Live. Microsoft would also be the first to enter into the seventh generation of game consoles with the Xbox 360 to counter Sony's later release of the PlayStation 3. While the Xbox had always featured computer-based components, Sony switched to a PowerPC-based system, backwards compatibility, Blu-ray format, and the creation of the PlayStation Network proved to be a powerful competitor. Also, Xbox 360s had the notorious hardware fault called the Red Ring of Death, which not only cost Microsoft $1 billion to fix, but deterred the market from the 360s despite the PS3's steep price, which would later decline. Of course, the PS3 would also later have one of the most critically acclaimed console exclusives of the time, The Last of Us, as well as other console exclusives such as the Uncharted series. Combined with the 360's aforementioned Ring of Death and achieving about 3 million more in sales, the winner of this second wave of console wars was actually the Wii. But the PS3 is second. I personally feel that Sony and Microsoft were so focused on each other that they completely forgot about their other major competitor, Nintendo. Given the family-friendly games available, the novelty of the Wii Remote, Wii Sports, as well as all of the Nintendo exclusive games that were maintaining console exclusivity, the Wii sold approximately 101,630,000 consoles by the time of its discontinuation in 2017 to make room for the Nintendo Switch. Once we got to that 8th generation of gaming, these mega corporations not only had the competition of the rising PC market, but the mobile game market as well. We really began to see the decrease in console sales from this point onward. Nowadays, with the exception of Nintendo, I've noticed that companies rarely release console exclusives anymore. Most games that are quote-unquote console exclusive are also released on PC, either through Steam or through the company's launchers, such as Epic Games. And that's not to say that consoles aren't still making sales. Many people can't afford to purchase a high-end gaming PC and are still willing to purchase consoles just due to the lower price. But as the world moves toward a more advanced computer development, I don't think that consoles will continue to be as popular as they once were. While the rush and panic of getting a PS5 has pushed the numbers into the 10 million range, the number of sales is still drastically lower compared to the PS4's 117 million over the course of its 9-year production lifespan. Now, considering that the PS5 has been subjected to frequent out-of-stocks over its 2 years of release, this could have greatly contributed to the smaller numbers than previous consoles, but utilizing some simple math shows that the PS4 averaged at about 13 million sales a year, and if the PS5 were to continue its average of 5 million a year, it would peak at 45 million sales over the course of the next 7 years. However, sales don't work like that. They usually tend to decline after the first 6 months to 2 years, unless it's a Nintendo Switch, and frankly, it's really unlikely that 45 million people are actually ever going to buy a PlayStation 5. When looking at the tech specifications of the modern consoles relative to what you can get with a PC, the price point of parts is really the only deterrent to building a computer yourself, aside from the fear of breaking your very expensive parts while building said computer. But as someone who has bought a crappy pre-built CyberPower PC from Best Buy, I know that the computer itself usually isn't too bad as long as you're smart enough to fix the mistakes that the dumbass who built your PC made. Of course, it would literally be better to just pay someone more knowledgeable to build you a computer, but my point is that even higher end PCs are becoming much more accessible than they once were. I also think consoles are much more likely to be bought by parents for their kids, but as the newer generations are having kids, we're tending to be a lot more technically savvy than the generations before. I know that if I have the funds to own both a high-end PC and a console, I'd probably go ahead and get a PS5, but in the future I'm much more likely to upgrade or build a new PC than choose to get a console. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on console relevancy. Aside from Nintendo, who I feel is doing it right, I don't think that consoles will be relevant for much longer. Of course, and in terms of accessibility, I hope these big companies don't just create a bunch of exclusive games for these giant consoles just to boost sales, but I hope that we see more innovations of the console market that we got to see with the Wii and motion control accessories of other consoles. Of course, with VR gaming coming to the scene, I think it'll be more likely that we'll see VR accessories becoming the main focus in the coming years. I'd like to thank you for watching this fairly short video, and again would love to discuss console relevancy with you in the comments below. If you like this video and would like to see more of my content, please consider subscribing and checking out my other videos. I currently am working on a gaming history series, but I'm hoping to start posting more in-depth and essay style videos like this one, as I'm planning to start upping my posts to 2 videos a week instead of just 1. And as always, it's been nice talking to you. I'm Purple Sark, and I'm logging off. Bye.